Greetings acolytes and tutors of the Force, and welcome back to the channel. I have been expecting you. The Star Wars franchise is undoubtedly and possibly debatably the most successful and well-known movie franchise to ever grace the halls of cinema, introducing many fan-favorite characters such as Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Yoda. Star Wars has left its mark upon the world of cinema, being the first main installment into the world of sci-fi, aside from Star Trek, which I have questionable opinions about. However, what most people would consider to be the most famous of all the Star Wars scenes in all of the Star Wars movies and TV shows would be the final battle on the Death Star 2 and the Battle of Endor between Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and the Rebel Alliance and the remnants of the Galactic Empire, as well as Darth Sidious playing a pivotal role, and IG-88 being in the background in the control of the Death Star, a huge orbital bombardment station that could destroy an entire planet with a single shoot of its kyber-infused power. A beam of green emerald energy that could demolish an entire planet instantly. Today, we shall be exploring one of the more key aspects and important components of the Battle of Endor. While there are many, and I will be sure to cover the remainder in the later video, we shall be covering the demise of the Sith, the prophecy of the Chosen One finally being fulfilled at the hands of Anakin Skywalker, and the supposed death of the one true Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Sidious, and the destruction of the Galactic Empire, leaving only remnants remain. Yes, my friends, we will be delving into the duel on the Death Star 2, the duel between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Emperor Sheev Palpatine, the three of the most intricate and politically enhanced figures in the entirety of Star Wars lore, who played more of an important role to the story than possibly any other being in all of Star Wars. Are you ready, acolytes? Let's begin. Before we begin, I would like to note that many of the starships that dock at our docking bays have not actually flipped the subscribe button and achieved the rank of Master. If you desire to learn more about the ways of the Force, then please, I implore you to hit the subscribe button. It is a necessity that you cannot pass up. Now, let's delve into the ancient holocrons depicting the duel aboard the Death Star. Just prior to the Endor strike team's failed assault into the shield generator bunker on the forest moon of Endor, with the Death Star space station orbiting the planet, Darth Vader brought Luke Skywalker, his own son, to the Emperor's observation tower within the top of the Death Star 2. There, Darth Sidious had schemed and planned ever since hearing about young Skywalker to convert and turn Luke's allegiances from the light to the dark side of the Force and install him as his new apprentice, replacing Vader, getting Luke to strike Vader down using his hate and anger. Vader also planned on turning Luke, but intended to use his son's raw potential and innate ability to touch the Force, almost as incredible as his father's, in order to help him kill Sidious, so they can rule the galaxy as father and son. Upon witnessing Luke and Vader's arrival, Sidious, after welcoming Luke, proceeded to remove Luke's stun cuff to ensure he would not utilize the Force or call upon his lightsaber during the engagement, as well as dismiss the present Royal Guardsmen from the throne room. The Royal Guardsmen being Darth Sidious's elite Praetorian Guard, similar to the design of the Praetorian Guard from Star Wars The Last Jedi, utilized by Supreme Leader Snow. Then, Sidious began to taunt Luke and toy with his emotions, slowly conversing him to the dark side, with what he believed to be the inevitability of Luke's fall, like his fathers before him. Luke implied that everyone on the Death Star, including himself and the Emperor, would soon be dead due to the actions of Lando Calrissian and the other rebel pilots, like the Death Star first before them. Proceeding to cackle maniacally like a crazed supervillain, Palpatine, while the former Luke indicated that their respective weaknesses were overconfidence and his faith in the Endor strike team's success, finally unveiling that the rebel strike team Luke had flooded and Admiral Akbar to infiltrate and disable the shield generator were walking into a carefully orchestrated trap Palpatine himself had provided the rebels with all the information they had on the Death Star too, including the construction site, the location of the planet-sized shield generator, and the albeit false information on the station's orbital status being operational, while playing the ploy that many Bothans had died to deliver the information, while he had delivered it himself. He also informed Luke of the fact that he had stationed an entire legion of his best troops at the site of the shield generator and were now in hiding, and that as such, the small rebel strike team had virtually no chance of deactivating the Death Star shield before the rebel fleet arrived and was crushed by the kyber-infused laser that was operated and activated by the Death Star. Shortly thereafter, the rebel fleet commenced its attack and was trapped between the shielded Death Star and Death Squadron, with the rebel fleet in dire straits and nearing its absolute and catastrophic destruction. Sidious began to taunt the young Jedi with the inevitable destruction of the Alliance and the deaths of all his friends, which he saw to be impending and unchangeable. Luke, helpless to aid his comrades, began to grow in rage, and he glanced down at his emerald lightsaber, sitting on the armrest of the Emperor's throne. Noticing Luke's gaze, Palpatine began to goad and prod Luke into taking the lightsaber to strike him down in anger. Luke, despite his growing anger like a tumour, remained defiant and refused to be baited by the dark side's seduction, although Sidious indicated that Luke's fall would be inevitable, and that in time he would fall to the dark side, just as his father had done before him. However, the Dark Lord of the Sith still had one more card to play. As he continued his constant taunting, he revealed to Luke that the Death Star's primary weapon systems were in fact operational, and ordered Jerajord to begin picking off rebel capital ships at his leisure activity, desiring to kill all of them to goad Luke into the full embrace of the dark side of the Force, and overthrow Vader. His emotions mounting, glanced down at his weapon a second time, and the Emperor repeated his challenge to Luke to strike him down. Luke turned back towards the viewport through which he had been observing the battle taking place many light years away. Several seconds later, he suddenly flicked back towards Sidious and summoned his weapon with the power of the Force, igniting the emerald blade from its emitter. He struck out at Sidious, only to have his blow intercepted by his father in Vader, as the Emperor cackled in triumph over the beginning and goading rage that Luke Skywalker was beginning to endure. Luke and Vader then began to duel atop the dais, with neither of them able to gain any sort of advantage for a considerable period of time. After a time, Luke suddenly intensified his attack and offensive strategy, forcing a shocked and bewildered Vader to retreat to the head of the stairs leading up to the dais. Taking advantage of Vader's precarious position and nature, Luke directed a kick in his chest at his breathing respirator, sending the Sith Lord, emotionally unstable, careering down the stairs to land in a heap on the floor below. Seeing the power of Luke's anger suddenly rapidly growing, Sidious approvingly told Luke to continue drawing on his hate and anger as Vader regained his footing and commenced his attack. The Dark Lord's word broke through Luke's anger and he deactivated his lightsaber, calming himself and refusing to play Sidious's game. Witnessing Luke's discipline, Vader solemnly stated that Obi-Wan had taught Luke well and had begun ascending the staircase towards his son, also towards the Emperor's throne. Luke then refused to continue fighting his father and began sluggishly and slowly backing away from Darth Vader, dismissing his son's declaration of peace and not fighting. Vader reached Luke in a short order and struck at the young Jedi with his crimson blade, forcing Luke to reactivate his Emerald One. After a brief flurry of swordplay, with neither one getting the advantage over the other, Luke leapt away from Vader into the center of one of the datapods in one of Palpatine's throne room. Vader drove his lightsaber between two of the slots on an attempt to slab Luke, but the young Jedi backflipped out of the pod and into a catwalk behind him. Safely concealed and away from Vader, Luke attempted to sway his father from the seductive influence and presence of the dark side within his mind, feeding his hate and power, informing Vader that he was emotionally conflicted and that he retained some good with him that he had failed to smother from his time as Anakin Skywalker. Vader denied the presence of any sort of internal conflict on his part, to which Luke responded by stating his belief that Vader would not kill him now, when he had not been able to bring himself to do so on the planet of Bespin. However, Vader asserted that Luke underestimated the power of the dark side of the Force, and that he would not fight, he would meet his destiny. With that, Vader guided his weapon with the Force and hurled his lightsaber at Luke. Luke managed to safely duck around to the side quickly enough to avoid his father's crimson-bladed weapon, leaving arcs of red throughout the air. But the lightsaber sheared through several of the catwalk's support struts, destabilizing the section where Luke was standing. As the gantry fell, Luke slid down and scurried beneath the dais as Sidious cackled cruelly. Vader strode down the stairs to where Luke had fallen, activating his reclaimed weapon as he did so. As Vader reached the entry to underside of the dais, Luke invited his father to follow him underneath it, claiming that he only wished to talk and negotiate with Vader about his current side and alignment with the Force. Vader, however, believed that Luke was planning and scheming to ambush him and refused. To prove to Vader that he intended no treachery on the Dark Lord, Luke hefted his lightsaber out from under the dais, where it rolled to a stop carefully at Vader's feet. Mocking Luke's foolishness and relinquishing his weapon, Vader picked it up and proceeded under the dais, intent on killing or converting his son. Vader began to stalk the shadows under the dais, but he could not find his son. After a short, fruitless search, Vader began a verbal attempt to draw Luke out of his hiding attempts, beginning with an assertion that Luke could not stay hidden forever, and could not blind the senses of a Dark Lord. Luke, however, merely repeated his earlier insistence that he was not going to fight, and Vader began to prey on Luke's strong emotions for his friends that were rapidly growing, telling him that giving himself to the dark side was the only way that he could save them and Leia and Han. Luke's fears for his friends began to emphasize and grow. Vader probed and prodded Luke's mind for more information about them that he could use to his advantage, and discovered that Luke had a twin sister, Leia Organa Solo Skywalker. Derisively commenting on what he thought of Obi-Wan's decision to hide her lineage, he then stated that if Luke would not turn to the dark side, then perhaps his sister would. With that, Luke's rage and boiling lust for anger exploded. Using the Force to retrieve his lightsaber from Vader, Luke tapped into the dark side of the Force and used his undying hate and anger to augment his physical prowess. He then attacked Vader with such intensity that their lightsabers, both of which had contained synthetic crystals, began to short out due to Luke's rage. Vader, taken completely off guard by Luke's sudden increase in power, aggression, and fury, was forced onto the back foot, somewhere he did not want to be, and quickly driven onto a short bridge and a defensive position between the throne room and the elevator he had originally emerged from. Luke continued to hammer Vader with vicious power attacks until Vader lost his footing and collapsed against a railing on the side of the bridge. After a few more blows, Luke drove Vader's lightsaber aside with an undercut and brought his weapon down on Vader's wrist, severing Vader's weapon and causing him to collapse to the floor, severing his robotic hand intertwined with muscle tissue. As Luke held his defenseless father at blade point, he heard Sidious laughing and cackling cruelly and maniacally, and proclaiming his satisfaction with Luke's power and rage, as Palpatine betrayed Vader by ordering Luke to finish Vader and take his place at the Dark Lord of the Sith's side. Luke removed his prosthetic hand from his lightsaber and looked down at it, glancing from it to the severed stump of Vader's own mechanical hand. Luke realized that he was on the brink of repeating Vader's destiny and took a deep breath to calm himself. Deactivating his lightsaber and tossing it away, Luke proclaimed that he would never turn to the dark side, affirming his identity as the last Jedi in the Order. Furious that he had failed to turn Luke, as had been the case with Vader's secret Padawan Galen Merrick 6 years prior, Palpatine proclaimed that if Luke would not turn, he would die. With that, Palpatine unleashed a heavy and relatively low-intensity barrage of Force lightning at Luke, asserting his superiority over the Jedi. blasting into several fixtures on the floor in front of a chasm above the reactor core of the Death Star, intending to torture Luke for his defiance and unwillingness to bow down to the wisdom and the seductive nature of the darkness. Palpatine asserted that Luke was a fool and fired another low-intensity blast at Luke. Luke attempted to use Tutaminis, like Grandmaster Yoda, to absorb the attack, but his lack of training in the technique, coupled with Palpatine's immense and nigh unstoppable power, resulted in impending failure. The electricity struck Luke's head on as he fired Sidious yet another blast, nearly forcing Luke over the fixtures into the reactor shaft, upon which he was perched upon, and into the chasm. The injured Darth Vader, who had by then just regained his feet, approached Darth Sidious from behind as the Dark Lord mocks the sprawled-out form of Luke Skywalker before him, proclaiming that Luke's own skills, no matter how powerful, were no match for the infinite dark side knowledge and power Palpatine had accumulated. As Luke struggled to pull himself off the fixtures and away from the chasm, Palpatine struck again, and Luke fell to the ground, writhing and shrieking in pain, snarling that Luke would pay the price for his lack of refusal to return. He began to fire a continual barrage of lightning as he writhed in agony on the floor. Luke pleaded with his father Vader to help him, but the conflicted Sith Lord did nothing as he assessed the situation: either defy his master and almost certainly die, or save his son and protect the lineage of the Jedi. After a few more moments of brief torture and excruciating pain, Palpatine ceased his endless seemingly barrage of lightning and informed Luke that his time to die had now come. He resumed his barrage, an array of lightning tendrils, preparing to increase the power of his lightning to lethal intensity to fully end the memory of the Jedi in the galaxy. However, unnoticed behind him, underneath the mantle of the Darth Vader, the Sith Lord that had dominated the will of Anakin Skywalker for roughly the last over 2 decades. He, unable to bear the sight of seeing his own son in excruciating agony, brought back horrific memories from his time on Mustafar at the mercy of his master Obi-Wan Kenobi. He found himself in a similar position from 23 years earlier, where he had made the fatal decision to save Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith, and his supposed friend from Mace Windu, the champion of the Jedi Order, who was killed by the Emperor, and then this began to bring to mind all of Anakin's painful and excruciating memories he had accumulated. He had been unable to save his mother 26 years earlier, during the events of Attack of the Clones. 3 years later, he had allowed Mace Windu to die under his master's power of the dark side. He had murdered hundreds of Jedi, and he had killed his former master and best friend, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He had inadvertently caused the death of his wife through his anger and his misguidance and division with the dark side, Padme Amidala, but he could save his son. Anakin Skywalker would not stand by to leave his son to fall. From that moment on, Darth Vader ceased to exist, as Anakin Skywalker's light side persona finally overpowered him, and Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, was reborn. In a final, heroic act of self-sacrifice, rectifying his mistake, helping Windu kill Sidious beforehand, in the Palpatine's office in the Senate, he grabbed Palpatine from behind, engaging him around the waist and crushing his organs with his amazing mechanical grip. As the Dark Lord increased the power of his lightning to its maximum capacity, intended to kill Luke. The energy, however, flowed into Anakin, but he did not care, and felt no pain, as the Emperor and the latter was hoisted off his feet, crushing his lungs with his mechanical grip that was acting on pure rage and justice, sparing Luke, screaming in pain, rage, and disbelief at the betrayal of his apprentice. Palpatine continued to fire his lightning at such intensity that Anakin's bones shone through in a glistening skeletal frame through his obsidian armor, but it did nothing to stop Anakin. He was dead set. He was going to save his son. Anakin staggered over to the chasm above the reactor core, and with his last remaining strength, he hurled Palpatine over the railing and into the dark abyss, alit with blue energy, the latter exploding into force energy shortly afterwards of the dark side. With its Dark Lord death and his apprentice redeemed, the Order of the Sith Lords was no more. However, the intensity of Sidious's lightning had been so great, lethal, and potent that it completely shorted out most of the sensitive electronics in Anakin Skywalker's suit and cybernetics, leaving him virtually helpless and on the brink of death when Luke recovered him. Luke, unwilling to leave his father behind to die in the ruins of the Death Star, managed to drag Anakin's cumbersome, immobile body within the brink of his Dark Lord armor to his shuttle, as a general evacuation of the Death Star 2 was proceeding around them. The rebel fleet almost ready to destroy the Death Star entirely. As they reached the shuttle, Luke stopped on the boarding ramp to catch his breath. Hefting the 160-kilo Darth Vader armor was an incredibly hard job, apparently. Propping Anakin's torso up, he looked down at his father, who requested that Luke answer his dying wish and help him remove his mask. Luke urgently reminded his father that without his mask, he would ultimately die and succumb to the Force. But Anakin knew that the damage to his cybernetics was irreversible and irreparable. Now, all that he wanted was to be able to look at Luke without the ocular filters of his mask in the way that had been stored 23 years earlier, after his maiming on Mustafar. Telling this to Luke, the boy obliged him and slowly removed the mask of the Dark Lord of the Sith that Anakin wore from nearly half his life. His dying request fulfilled, Anakin told Luke to leave him and go, but Luke adamantly proclaimed that he would never do that, and that he intended to save his father. But Anakin replied that Luke had already done so by freeing him from the embrace of pain that the Emperor had kept him under for the last over 2 decades. With that, Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, with the highest midichlorian count to ever exist in Star Wars, died in his son's arms, finally free from the evil that had consumed him from the conclusion of the Clone Wars throughout the Galactic Civil War, having fulfilled his role as the Chosen One who would bring balance to the Force. Well, my friends, that was the complete analysis of the duel aboard the Death Star 2. Tell me if I should analyse any more duels, and tell me which ones in the comments down below. Goodbye, acolytes, and I'll see you in a galaxy far, far away.